Hey everyone, this is Kyle from Notional Finance, and you're listening to the Notable Builders podcast. There are more DeFi projects than ever to keep up with, so we're going behind the scenes to chat with the real builders, the people driving innovation, bringing in new users, and creating real value for the entire ecosystem. Today we talk with Pablo Veyrat, a core contributor to Angle Protocol, which is described as the first decentralized, capital-efficient, and over-collateralized stablecoin protocol. It started with the first liquid euro stablecoin on-chain and is already seeing great adoption across DeFi. We discuss Angle's unique design using hedging agents instead of traditional liquidation and how that helps solve the issue of collateral volatility, as well as many other topics. Enjoy! Let's go ahead and get started, guys. First of all, my name is Kyle from Notional, and we're here today with the CEO of Notional, Teddy Woodward, and also really happy to have Pablo here from Angle Protocol to just give us a little rundown about what's going on there. And let's just get started, get right into it. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself, how you got into DeFi, and what exactly you're doing over at Angle?
Thanks for having me, guys. A pleasure to be here today. So yeah, I came into DeFi quite late. Everyone tells you, I've done the Ethereum ICO. It was definitely not my case. Entered in DeFi in 2019. First became a crypto investor in 2019. Then entered in DeFi in late 2020. And at this point, I was getting yield on USD stablecoins by playing with Compound, since I had a class on Compound when I was a student at Stanford University. And I thought, we need to create Euro stablecoins to give opportunities for people in DeFi to get yield on their home currency. So to give these opportunities to European people. And then we thought, with some Stanford friends, if we can do this for the euro, we should do this for any currency. When we had this in mind, this thing we wanted to achieve, the question was okay, how do we make it possible? How do we make stablecoins? And we found it was possible to really improve stablecoin protocols, the way they work, the way their capital efficiency and maker. And so from the idea of making non-USD stablecoin protocol, we ended up making our own stablecoin protocol, the Angle protocol, which we conceive to be both over-collateralized and capital efficient. And that's what we're doing. So far, we've just launched a Euro stablecoin, and we are trying for which we are trying to be liquidity. But yeah, that's the goal of Angle. That's how I came into DeFi.
Awesome, that's great. So how does the use case differ from a USDC stablecoin versus a Euro stablecoin? Is there any difference? And why do you think this product hadn't really been built out yet before you got into the space?
The use case, it's really the same. It's just that it's pegged to the euro rather than the USD. So it remains a stable currency. And if you're in Europe, you would prefer normally to hold euros rather than USD because you don't want to care about the change risk. And this is really as simple as that. However, and as I said before, the way we are making the stablecoin, it differs from every stablecoin protocol. We are a decentralized protocol with a DAO behind it, and we are we are not like USDC. And the way our protocol works differs from Maker, from Abracadabra, from Liquidity, from Five Frax. I could go in more details about it later, but that's the gist of it. We just try to build the non-USD money layer for DeFi and to allow people wherever they are in the world to get access to assets denominated in a currency they are close to. So don't know if that answers your question.
So I've heard you talk a little bit about how Angle differs from Maker, for example. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, about how you've worked around some of the problems you've seen in Maker or what you perceived as to be the issues there?
First, I want to say that there are no real issues with Maker. Maker is a protocol that works super well. It has proven to be consistent for some amount of time. So it's definitely not something that is inadapted to DeFi. But one drawback with Maker is that for the moment, it's capital inefficient to get DAI. If you want to mint, you need to get at least 1.5 of collateral to mint 1 of DAI. This makes it not super adapted for a system in which you want to be able to get stablecoins super easily, and in a future financial systems in which stablecoins are going to be the base layer of DeFi. So yeah, capital inefficiency is one of the main drawbacks. The other drawback, but it's not really an issue because the protocol works well, DAI has been super stable to USD, is the fact that there are no direct arbitrages whenever the price of DAI deviates from peg. If you remove the price stability module. In systems like Maker, Abracadabra, what makes the stablecoin stable is not that obvious. If you have a deviation of the price of DAI, for instance, from $1, there are no arbitrages which come and take a direct arbitrage in one transaction to make a profit. And this is what we try to correct. So what Angle does, Angle was designed to be capital efficient. So you give the protocol one of collateral, you get one of stablecoin. You give one of stablecoin, you get one of collateral. And the way it does to keep the safety, because DAI is over-collateralized and it can resist like really black swan events, the way the protocol does to resist this scenario is that it issues perpetual futures to insure itself against the volatility of its collateral. So let's say you give the protocol €1 worth of USDC, we give you like 1.1 USDC, we give you €1. Now the protocol owns USDC in reserves, but these USDC are variable with respect to the euro, meaning their price could decrease. And when like the person who has the euro comes back to the protocol, well, we need to find a way to give this person the corresponding value in euros. So what we do is that we issue perpetual futures. It's leveraging contracts, like classical contracts you can find in many exchanges, in BitMEX, in FTX. You know, people come, they say, look, you have this volatile collateral. So USD is not super volatile with respect to the euro. And what I'm describing could work with ETH, it could work with Bitcoin. USD is not like you have volatile USD with respect to euro. I'm going to commit to the volatility of this USD. Now, if the price of USD increases with respect to the euro, well, I get the right to capital gain I would have made if I had owned the USDC. But if the price decreases, well, you are going to take a portion of the USD I brought in the first place to keep a stable collateral value in reserves. So maybe the product can sound a bit complex like that in the first place, but really you can see Angle as a marketplace between people who want stability and people who want volatility. And those who want volatility get the volatility of the collateral of the people who wanted stability. This can work perfectly at all times, provided that you always have people opening perpetual futures. But it's not always the case. You know, when you come and give us $1 million worth of USDC, we don't always have people opening up long perpetual futures. And so what we are doing to remedy that, we are letting other people come in the protocol to over-collateralize it. We call these people standard liquidity providers. And these people, what they do is just that they lend collateral to the protocol in exchange for yield. Yield they get from transaction fees that are taken when people mint and burn stablecoins, and yield from what the protocol gets when it invests in collateral in strategies. And this is where I think the Notional discussion starts to be interesting, because Angle is a stablecoin protocol, but it is also a protocol which is somehow similar to Yarn in that it tries to get yield on its reserves. And this is the business model, and this is how the protocol makes a revenue. A long answer. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Thanks for all that. I've got some questions. So it's an interesting construction, right? Like I could see you want to push off the risk of the sort of price of the collateral falling to basically somebody else that wants it. And I can see that that's got to be the bottleneck for you, because what if nobody else wants to take the other side of that trade? And I guess a question that I have is like, you're trading one sort of collateralization restriction, or like you're limiting your growth. You've got to like have a ton of like the amount of Angle euro that you can issue is kind of capped by the amount of these standard liquidity providers that you have to some extent, right? In the absence of, actual end users on the other side of that want to take the other side of that risk. Is that true?
We are more capped by the amount of, so we are capped by the amount of hedging agents and standard liquidity providers, not just standard liquidity providers. So if we fail to attract many standard liquidity providers and many hedging agents to take perpetual futures, then the AG euro you issue are not super safe, as like the protocol may get in a position in which it's not super over collateralized. So somehow the protocol is capped, but several remarks to that. First, we're not necessarily capped. I think standard liquidity providers are never going to be the blocking point, because let's say that we have 100 of collateral in the protocol with 10 of collateral and 110, like 100 from users which wanted stable coins and 10 from standard liquidity providers. Well, then like the protocol has yield strategies. And so this yield, the yield we get by lending to Compound Aave so far, it's a yield we distribute in portion to standard liquidity providers. And so standard liquidity providers, they may end up in a situation in which they only brought 10 of collateral, but they get a yield on as if they had brought 110. So they could get 11x the yield they would have gotten if they had implemented the same strategy as what we're doing. So the fewer standard liquidity providers there are, the more interesting it becomes to be a standard liquidity provider. And so the growth of AG euro pushes the growth of standard liquidity providers. So I wouldn't say that standard liquidity providers are the bottleneck. The real bottleneck, it's hedging agents. Other thing is that we have fees which are dynamic and which can naturally adjust. And so the way this cap is implemented in the protocol, it's like if the protocol sees that it is not sufficiently hedged by hedging agents and that it is not sufficiently over-collateralized by standard liquidity providers, then minting fees increase and it gets more expensive to mint AG euro. But there is no real cap per se on the amount of AG euro you can issue depending on hedging agents and standard liquidity providers in the protocol.
All right, that's interesting. So you've pushed the liquidation risk onto these like hedging agents. Do you have like a collateralization framework for these guys? Like, are you liquidating hedging agents?
Yes, we are. The way it works is that to liquidate hedging agent, you don't need to bring any collateral. It's really like clicking on a button and liquidating the hedging agent. Because liquid hedging agents, when they come in the protocol, they just need to bring some margin. Let's say you want to take a 10x leverage. You bring like 100 USDC and you commit to the volatility of 900 USDC. So your leverage here is 10x. And when you get liquidated, your 100 USDC, your initial margin, like you just lose access to it. You can no longer claim it and it belongs to the protocol. And the way we pay liquidators is that we give them a portion of the 100 USDC we got from hedging agents in the first place when they opened their position.
Okay.
Liquidations happen when the value of your position, like the 900 USDC, is starting to fall too low. So for a 10x leverage, you need to have a 10% decrease in value to be liquidated. And like this is the counterpart. Like if price increases, you can get like leverage capital gains. If you have a 10% increase, you can make 100% capital gain. But a 10% decrease, then you just lose everything you have brought.
Right. And so when a hedging agent gets liquidated, is the liquidator then taking the Euro USD risk, or is that being essentially pushed onto the protocol itself?
It's being pushed onto the protocol. But in this situation, like fees to open position, like really decrease, and it becomes far cheaper to open positions within the protocol.
So when the guy gets liquidated, then the protocol is taking the exchange rate risk. How does the protocol cover itself?
Through standard liquidity providers. Standard liquidity providers are here to cover for the gaps for when the protocol has to take some risk. Standard liquidity providers are the ones taking this risk.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
When did you launch, and how has the track record been as far as like maintaining the Euro peg?
Track record has been rather like super good since the beginning because AG Euro has been super robust. It has held a robust peg since launch in November. We launched on the 3rd of November 2021. Like AG Euro is even an asset which is used to stabilize other Euro stablecoins thanks to integrations on Curve, like EURES and EURT, like other Euro stablecoins. They are becoming stable thanks to AG Euro, which has direct arbitrage opportunities. The protocol has not been fully hedged at all time by its hedging agents for several reasons, I guess. First, because we had high fees when we launched. Other reason is that, it's rather like hedging agent. It's kind of a complex product to understand. And what we see is that in DeFi, like really complex products are having a hard time making them known and being used. Like there's a protocol I really like. It's a Swift from OPWine. And I feel that they are getting some traction, but since it's so complex, they are not getting the traction they should be getting for a product of this quality. This is the second explanation. And the third explanation for me is that we are the first one to offer leverage on Forex in DeFi. It's kind of new. Demand for it is currently building up, but I'm super confident that eventually in the coming years, we will meet a full demand for Forex leverage and for hedging agent position. We are thinking about launching ETH as a collateral for the protocol. And so we would be on a more classical product where people would be able to take long leverage ETH Euro positions with like up to, it's to be defined, but a 20x leverage. AG Euro and the protocol has held super well. We have like 200 million TVL. We have been growing. Now the TVL is kind of stagnating and we're working on other modules to bootstrap this growth. But we're confident that DeFi for Euro and DeFi for non-USD stablecoin will explode at some point.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you talked a little bit about like the challenges, with these complex products. I think that really like rings true. What's been the most like surprisingly difficult thing for you about getting Angle off the ground?
Like for me, it's really about fighting against the chicken and egg problem. People won't use your product unless they have incentives to use it, but they won't have incentives to use it unless other people use it. And That's the problem we're all facing in terms of protocol. I guess you have the same issue with Notional. You're launching super cool products, but no one can really will really use like innovative product unless there is significant TVL in it. And yeah, that's the main issue. Our strategy to counter that. So first we have a token which makes it easier to bootstrap and pay for our growth. And then we have a multi-chain strategy. We're trying to be present on as many chains as possible to create some stickiness and to take advantage of the whole wave of DeFi users which are coming to DeFi and which are going to come to DeFi through side chains, layer 2s, through low fees protocols. And the strategy is to be early with new protocols which are launching so that when they launch, they have AG Euro from scratch. So really, we want to see new launching protocols because that's how we're going to get the new wave of users of DeFi.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the multi-chain strategy is obviously something we're talking a lot about, and a lot of the Ethereum-based protocols are having to grapple with. What's sort of your strategy for navigating all of the different? Because I mean, that sounds like a huge obstacle or challenge because there's so many chains now. There's so many directions you need to go to get places to get AG Euro integrated with. How do you start chipping away at that?
It's true. It's true that it's hard. There are so many opportunities. Like at first, I thought that and I'm talking personally. I'm not talking from the Angle protocol perspective. Personally, I first thought that the best strategy would be a brute force strategy, like contact everyone, try to show that you can bring value, that you can help DAOs diversify their treasury, that you really could be the next asset that is used by all the European DeFi users. So this was the first strategy. We were trying to contact everyone. And now we spend more time and efforts on blockchains which have significant adoption and usage, and to create liquidity for AG Euro. Like the playbook we're trying to follow for every chain is first we need to build liquidity through a partnership with a DEX. Then we need to create some form of lending mechanism and way to get leverage thanks to the liquidity we have. So for instance, if we're on Polygon, we have just launched a market on market.xyz. We have deep liquidity on Polygon, on QuickSwap, and on Curve. And on market.xyz, people can now lend ETH to borrow AG Euro and get a yield on this. So first liquidity, then lending integrations. And then you can really go seek new integrations like home forks or option products or other more advanced DeFi protocols. And this is really for me the easiest way to grow AG Euro on the chain. To come back to your questions, we're targeting chains with more usage and volatility and liquidity, even though a totally understandable strategy could also be to go and seek new chains with nothing in it, so that when they build with, when they grow with AG Euro in it. We try to do this on Aurora. We will launch a pool on Fuse quite soon, but it's like from Aurora, we saw that it was not that easy, to grow AG Euro on a chain with nothing much in it.
I think it's interesting you talk about, trying to get DAOs and protocols to diversify their treasury into using, AG Euro. That's obviously something that we're on a mission to do as well. So let's talk a little bit about the proposal that was made for Angle to diversify its treasury and by allocating into Notional's fixed rates. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I don't know what the reaction has been. How do you see that unfolding, or if it might happen? What do you think on that?
So first thing I want to say is I may be speaking about with Angle Protocol Twitter account, but I'm giving only my personal point of view as Pablo Veyrat. My views do not embody the views of the DAO. What I personally think, I personally view Angle as a bank. Like we have collateral in reserves, which is backing our stablecoins. We cannot afford to do anything we want with this collateral by farming like shit coins or things like that. We need to keep some trust level, meaning that all our investments, our treasury allocation need to be done in a hard-coded way through a strategy, through a smart contract to maintain the full transparency and to not give that many power to some individuals which could steal the funds and move away with the money of the protocol. The capital we invest should be, to my mind, immediately redeemable from the protocol. Because let's say we invest 200 million, but someone wants to burn for 200 million of stablecoins, then we need to be able to get this capital back to give the person with the stablecoins the corresponding value of it. There are people with claims on the Angle treasury, and we need to be able to immediately get our capital back to accommodate these claims when they come to the protocol. So these are my couple of initial remarks. I think that, and to come back to the fact that Engel is a bank that has money in reserves and that is making a revenue of it. One of our core focus beyond like growing a Giro, beyond growing adoption and integration of it, it's really more like an optimization. One thing we are working on at the moment is really improving the yield strategies we are making as a bank, like some sort of treasury management. So Engel should spend more time doing some treasury management. We are working on it, and there are better strategies to do. And that's why I find the Notional integration quite relevant. And that's why I think there is a chance that we could be ready as a protocol to have this soon, like to have a yield strategy for Engel built on top of Notional, because Notional has super interesting yield. It has a unique value proposal. And I think it scales super well. Like the yield integration shows it. It scales super well, and it could scale to like 200 million of the protocol. But before arriving to that, we need to develop the strategy. We need to develop the smart contract. And this is where the bottleneck is at the moment. It takes time. It takes audits. It hence takes money to implement a strategy. And we will need to implement a strategy in such that we are maximizing yield for the protocol while taking into account Notional specificities. And Notional specificities is, for me, it's the fact that, depending on when you withdraw and when you are, where you are, depending like on the term of the product you bought, like you may get a slippage when exiting. And so a strategy should try to optimize for that. And there are some, I think, complexities in implementing that in Solidity. I'm not saying this is infeasible, but there are some blocking points ahead. So I don't know if that answers your point here.
Yeah, for sure. Teddy, what do you want to say generally about that issue of immediate redeemability that I think a lot of DAOs are talking about in terms of can they allocate to Notional and how that works?
First of all, Pablo, I completely understand, where you're coming from. And I think that Notional it has a unique value proposition, but at the same time, there are these kind of unique, they're not unique, but they are different from other stuff in DeFi, like different challenges, things that you need to understand and handle. And I guess, as I think you're aware and you're pretty, relatively familiar with Notional, you can withdraw your assets at any time. But like you said, there's this, potential slippage issue that you'll run into if you try to withdraw your exits prior or your assets prior to maturity. And so, because I understand where you're coming from. Like, I think that ultimately Notional provides something that's really valuable. Like, it's qualitatively different than what else is out there. High fixed rates. But it's kind of the flip side is that to utilize Notional effectively, it takes some work, right? Which is exactly kind of what you're talking about. Like, you're busy and you're doing a lot of stuff, and using Notional and getting the most out of it, and like handling it all, it does take like a little bit of work. You've got to really dig in. And I think that is a barrier. Now, what I would say, though, is that the value that Notional provides, I think, is worth it. I imagine that if you're kind of looking around the DeFi space for what to do with your USDC, you're probably not seeing an awful lot of value in terms of risk versus reward. And I think that if you put Notional in context with the kind of the other opportunities for your capital, like, I think Notional looks pretty good from a financial standpoint. And I think that, like, over time, it's sort of like, I'm not sure when exactly this will make sense for you, but I think that the amount of sort of upfront effort and handling that it takes to use Notional will wind up being worth it, just because sort of on an economic basis, what we provide is, I would say substantially more attractive than the other kind of yield opportunities for USDC on Ethereum.
One question I get, like, what makes Notional unique in terms, and for our audience, because maybe not everyone is aware of that. Like, I know we've had some conversations, and I've been able to understand. Sorry, what's the reason for the higher yield on Notional than on other equivalent? Like, why would I borrow on Notional rather than borrow somewhere else? We would be interesting to have that clearer, because essentially what's interesting in DeFi, it's really to understand the source of the yield and of why there is yield. Most of the time, yield in DeFi comes from like token inflation, so DAOs being able to print tokens which have a value which is decreasing when there are high emissions, and so which can justify some yield. Sometimes yield comes from volume. When people are using your assets, you are creating an inherent yield to use your assets because it brings money to be a LP of this asset on like Uniswap. Or sometimes people are ready to borrow your assets because it's a cheap way to get leverage, or because they have other ways to farm using this asset. What's the base source of the yield on Notional?
So the yield on Notional is organic, and so kind of to your point, Pablo, for people that aren't aware in the audience, Notional is a fixed rate lending and borrowing protocol. So the main difference between something like Notional and something like Compound or Aave is that the rate that you are earning as a lender and paying as a borrower is a fixed rate, so it doesn't change. And as a lender, you're earning interest that the borrower is paying. So as a lender, your return has nothing to do with token incentives, right? There's no, you don't need to farm and sell and do anything else. You're earning clean organic yield. The reason we've seen higher interest rates on Notional, basically there's a few reasons here. So one reason is that borrowers just want to pay to lock in the certainty of the fixed rate. So we've seen people that borrow on Notional and are willing to pay a premium over rates, the variable rate that they see because they want the certainty that Notional provides. So that's one thing. Another thing is that you can provide liquidity on Notional. So without getting too much technical detail of how Notional works, we have liquidity providers on our platform, and our liquidity tokens are natively eligible as collateral to borrow against. And so what we get a lot of is people providing liquidity on Notional and then borrowing fixed against that liquidity they're providing. And so that has also contributed to sort of borrowing rates increasing. So kind of really what we see right now is that Notional has kind of structurally higher yields because borrowers are willing to pay a premium to access fixed rates. And also we have liquidity providers on the Notional platform that are earning a lot providing liquidity, and they are willing to borrow against that liquidity, and they're unable to do that anywhere but Notional.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks for sharing all this. Everything makes more sense now. Everything is clear. Now I guess for us, the real question is, it's more of a technical question. Are we able to make a strategy which allows this optimal redeemability? How do we make Notional fit in the Angle system? So Angle, at the core team, we are working on a new strategy that we will be allowing people will be able to vote for this strategy quite soon. It's like a leverage, like a recursive strategy built on top of Aave. We are also working on a recursive strategy built on top of Compound, and we will launch a curve, single-sided, convex single-sided farming strategies. And so when we're good on that front, I guess we could start and conceive and see if we have the bandwidth and if we think we are technically able to integrate with Notional. But before making the community vote on it, I think it makes sense to try to see if it's feasible to do something.
Right. No, I understand. That's actually interesting. So you guys are going to do a recursive lending strategy, huh? The interest rates on Notional are substantially greater than even the recursive lending strategies on Compound and Aave. And I would imagine that actually when you talk about technical complexity, I would imagine that the development effort required to put those strategies together is substantially greater, given the need to, you've got to handle the incentive token, right?
Yeah, it's not that easy. Actually, we use the Compound, the year-end strategies as a basis. We found out that we could do better than Compound, and so it required some time, studying Compound, how it works, how they are doing, because it's not always the best solution to just fork a strat without understanding what it does, and so we should be ready on it. I think by the end of next week, should be able to launch it by the end of next week, hopefully. And then when we're good on that, but yeah, it took some time. It took us almost a month to have a good strategy. We were not full time on this, but it really takes some time and some development effort.
So, I mean, have you looked at the, with that, I don't know what you're kind of at liberty to say here, but now, are you going to be doing sort of periodic claiming and selling of incentive tokens with these strategies? Is that part of your strategy?
Yes.
And have you looked at the gas costs involved in doing that? Like, I imagine that you have.
Yes, we have. The rationale is pretty simple. If you have like 200 million in reserves and like for which like on which you are getting yield, like 0.5% difference, it can justify significantly higher gas cost. And the strategy is going to incur high gas cost, but it doesn't matter really much when there is volume on the strategy, and if it brings more value to the protocol and to token holders in the end.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
selling the tokens, it's not that costly. Like it's just a 1-inch call, call to 1-inch API on chain. Yeah, it's super easy.
All right, well, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, we can sort of help you kind of think through how best to effectively use Notional. But I can, honestly, the short answer is that it'll be easier because you don't have to claim and sell any token incentives. You don't have to do anything like that. And it's going to be a higher net effective yield, by a fair amount. But yeah, I think it should be a good strategy for you guys.
I understand the value of it. There's just the redeemability thing. And how do we handle slippage? And how do we handle if we 10x our TVL and we have just subscribed to a product for a term of 6 months, which is not obvious also. But there are scenarios in which we could decide to allocate a small portion of the strategy of the protocol's TVL in the strategy, and then decide that we will never withdraw from it unless really the protocol went empty. This could be a way also.
That makes sense. I think that, without, I don't want to get sort of too far off the rails here, but without going too much in depth, that could be a decent place to start, right? Where if you and because basically what you can do, or what we would do is you write some probabilities. So you have some expectation for how likely is it that, you'd need to redeem greater than 90% of your assets, right? So you assign some probability to that case, and then you go and look at what would the cost be to exit your Notional strategy in that event, right? And then you look at and that's how you'd go and figure that out, right? And I imagine that, there is some percentage of your TVL such that it is quite an attractive thing to do.
I see. Maybe it could be interesting to have some community members, or maybe if you want to put the math by yourself, But you're right. It definitely makes sense to view it this way, in terms of conditional expectation and what's the revenue we can make from it.
All right. Okay. Cool.
I was just gonna hop in and throw it out to the audience. If there is anyone listening that has questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you in there. If not, in the meantime, maybe we can just have one final question, maybe for both you guys, where do we see Angle or Notional in 1 year's time? But maybe let's just do 6 months. How are you going to determine some success metrics for Angle in the next 6 months or a year?
So for Angle, the first success metric is the stability of AG Euro. If AG Euro remains stable, then we'd be happy with it. But that's not all. Second success metric is the total supply of AG Euro. And so, we want AG Euro to become again the biggest Euro stablecoin. That would be the success metric in 6 months. AG Euro being the biggest Euro stablecoin, and then the other success metric will be the TVL of the protocol, which is not directly correlated to the total supply of AG Euro. With the new module we will be launching, it's going to be easier to grow TVL because people could basically deposit ETH, borrow AG Euro out of it. I forgot to mention it, but we're working on a new minting module, growing, maintaining AG Euro stability, growing AG Euro, growing TVL, and launching new stablecoins. That's what I want to see Angle in the following 6 months, and better yield strategies as well, of course.
Teddy, you want to go for it too?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that, what I really want in the next 6 months for Notional, I think that, obviously TVL and loan volume increases are helpful metrics to look at that are numerical. But I think that just from what we have on the development side of things, I think from a business side, what I'd really like to see is more integrations. So I think that kind of as part of this conversation, you can see is that a challenge we have at Notional is packaging up the product that we offer in a way that makes it accessible and usable by other protocols or by funds or whoever. Because I think that Notional it's certainly different than other DeFi protocols and can be sort of challenging. And so, we've had some success doing that. We've already gotten, for example, Yearn to write a strategy for Notional and integrate the protocol. But I want us to have more success there. So I think that the most important thing kind of in the next month or in the next 6 months, if you set the development, kind of further development of the protocol aside, is just getting more protocols to integrate with Notional, more products built on top of Notional, and just really getting to a point where we've really been able to solve the problem of putting Notional's value proposition into a package that people can understand, implement, and use. Because I think that is it's the main challenge for Notional from a business standpoint. It's just it's how to take the raw material of Notional and package it into something that people can really use, like Angle Protocol. So I think that we want more of these integrations to happen and just and build up kind of some reference material so that people, in the future, it's a lot easier to understand how to effectively use Notional. We have a lot more examples to point to. So I would say that's kind of what I'm thinking for the next 6 months.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I don't see anything from the audience, so I will just take the opportunity to say thanks a lot to Pablo from Angle Protocol. If you're not already following them over on Twitter, either at Angle Protocol or Angle.money. And we, of course, are Notional.finance. And Pablo, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Come back anytime.
It was a real pleasure, and looking forward to seeing and exploring more DAO to DAO collaborations, because essentially this is what DeFi is about, and this is why we are trying to push for it. So DAOs collaborating together, this is what we like about DeFi, about it being composable. And if we can't make the strategy, I'm sure there will be other ways in which we could help Notional, and in which Notional could help Angle, and this is why we're in the space. We're all in this together, and we share I think we share the same ethos and the same values. So super happy to be in the space with people like you.
Sounds good. Yeah, it was great to to chat, Pablo. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys. Talk to y'all later.